Sir, welcome. Good evening, sir. Chopra sir, good evening.
Good evening. Good evening, Pramod.
Yes, good evening. I will make you co-host.
Yeah.
We will wait for the 10 minutes past 8 o'clock.
Okay.
First, Abhishek will talk. Then the Temi in COVID era.
Yeah.
Samir sir, welcome. Good evening.
गुड इव्हनिंग प्रमोद.
एक 10 मिनिटं वाट बघू.
हो चालेल ना.
8:10 चालू करू आपण पहिलं लेक्चर. 18 पीपल.
चालेल.
Right, sir, नमस्ते. हा सर.
तुझ्याकडे रेमडेसिवीरचा स्टॉक किती आहे?
नाही अजून. नॉट अवेलेबल.
आज मला एकाने विचारलं की रेमडेसिवीर
process मध्ये आहे. They are saying they open the tender. Even if they open the tender and they give the order, I doubt whether the supplier will be able to supply them to the government. Supplier कडे स्टॉक नसल्यामुळे अवघड जाणार आपल्याला. समीर सर, तुम्ही म्यूट केलंय.
एक फोन आलाय मला प्रमोद. हॅलो. पॉझिटिव्ह बऱ्यापैकी यायला लागलेत लोक. अँटीजन टेस्ट बद्दल प्रमोद तू म्हणाला की लवकरच चालू होईल आपल्याकडे. ते आपल्या गव्हर्नमेंट सेटअपला अँटीजन सुरू करणार आहेत प्रायव्हेट. हॅलो प्रमोद.
Abhishek sir, are you online? Dr. Abhishek?
अभिषेक अजून जॉईन झाला नाही वाटतं ना?
हो नाही सर अजून.
हो ना. हम्म.
बेटा ये प्रोजेक्ट बनाया चटनी में शुरू कर दी वहां पे दिन में शुरू कर दो बेटा
हेलो
Arey, I can see Praveen Gare online. That's a good surprise, pleasant surprise. Praveen,
Hi sir,
कसा आहेस?
मजेत.
All well ना?
Yes, all good. I am here to learn actually.
Yes, प्रमोद आहे आपल्या इथे बसलेला डॉन.
Ah,
आज दिनेशच्या पोस्ट मध्ये तुझा उल्लेख सापडला एका ठिकाणी त्यांनी जेव्हा उत्तर दिलं तेव्हा. सो वी फेल्ट नाईस की यू आर इन टच.
Yeah.
तुमच्याकडे काय अर्ली इंट्युबेशन स्ट्रॅटेजी आहे का सिंगापूरला?
सर आमच्याकडे आता करोना आता म्हणजे करंटली गेल्या 15 दिवसापासून आयसीयू मध्ये एकही पेशंट नाही पूर्ण सिंगापूर मध्ये.
काय सांगतोस?
येस.
मग प्रमोदला स्थलांतर करायला सांगू का तिकडे? हं? आमच्याकडे तर बेकार आलं तिकडे.
हा नाही सिंगापूर नाव 100+ पेशंट्स आर देअर पर डे बट दे ऑल आर हेल्दी आणि नो आयसीयू ऍडमिशन सिन्स ऑलमोस्ट ऍक्च्युअली 3 weeks.
Great. This is after how many days, Ani?
We started in February 2nd week. Actually, the peak was in March, and then so our last admission in my ICU was May 1st week.
Okay, आणि peak 10 February का? म्हणजे मार्च एप्रिल 2 महिने.
हा मार्च एप्रिल वॉज पीक. त्या 2 महिन्यात बरेच पेशंट होते.
If we say that Nasik is going to peak at around say this month end, जर आपण असा विचार केला तर मग we have to face the music for another month or so.
सर माझ्या मते दोन्ही ठिकाणचं कंपॅरिझन थोडं डिफिकल्ट आहे.
कारण पॉप्युलेशन डेन्सिटी आपली जास्ती आहे त्याच्यामुळे.
हो पॉप्युलेशन डेन्सिटी त्याच्यानंतर इथं म्हणजे सगळं कम्प्लीट लॉकडाऊन होतं ना त्याच्यामुळे सिंगापूरमध्ये कोणी आलंच नाही बाहेरून. फ्रॉम 1st की 3rd मार्च पासून पूर्ण बंदच झालं सगळं. तसं माझ्या मते नाशिकला डिफिकल्ट आहे ना हे चालूच राहणार आपल्याकडे.
नाशिक मध्ये जरा
हम्म
काय आपलं अवघडच आहे लॉकडाऊन.
हो ना दोन्हींचं कंपॅरिझन थोडं डिफिकल्ट आहे माझ्या मते.
Hi Praveen, how are you?
हॅलो सर. मजेत.
I think Abhishek has joined.
येस.
Tamil sir, काय म्हणता तुम्ही?
काय नाही सर मजेत आहे.
Good. चलो प्रमोद चालू करूया.
Yes.
Yes.
Abhishek,
Yes, let's
you
go
can,
ahead.
you can, yes, sir. We'll start with the first lecture. We have the 2 lectures. First will be by the Abhishek sir on the treatment protocol, and the second will be on the STEMI by Chopra sir. Last time we had 2 good discussion by Dr. Dongre madam on the steroids and the tocilizumab, and the second by Dr. Wak sir on the remdesivir and favipiravir. So may I request Dr. Abhishek to start the presentation?
Yeah. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, sir.
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yes, absolutely, loud and clear.
Yes, Abhishek, you're audible.
Yes. So first of all, I would like to thank COVID Task Force to give me this opportunity to be with you all this evening, and of course with current ongoing pandemic and so many things going on. Hello.
Yeah, you can continue.
Continue, sir. Continue.
Go ahead,
Yes,
go
I
ahead.
agree. Abhishek, sir, continue.
Yeah. So it's so many things going on since yesterday. Is like we've been facing a lot of problems as far as the availability of shortage of life-saving drugs, which have been going on since a lot of time. So if we look at the things that have been, or if we look at the things which have been happening since past 3 months, so definitely we are on the turn where with the help of these medicines and with the help of early anticipations in treating the COVID-19 patients, we are getting a lot of success in treating these cases, irrespective of their criticality or irrespective of their critical status. But while doing so, we faced many challenges as far as when we entered into this foray, or when we entered into this COVID scenario. We when we entered this scenario, we were faced with many challenges as far as the patient's severity index is concerned, or as far as the ventilation protocol is concerned, as far as the pharmacological aspects are being concerned. So with the due course of time, and in this with these in this due course of time, we have come across and we have set up some we've been successfully set up some protocolized treatment avenues for this COVID-19. So as far as the management is being concerned, so we first of all is like divide the total disease process into the milder form, like early infection, moderate form with pneumonia with no signs of severe disease, and very severe pneumonia like ARDS, leading into the sepsis and septic shock. So how can I have next slide?
Sir, I will change it for you.
Pramod sir?
Yes, sir, I am changing it.
We will change it.
Yes.
From your laptop also you can move it.
Because I have shared it. Otherwise, I have to stop the share and you have to share the slides.
So here it is. So when we have milder symptoms or milder forms coming to us in the OPD, like most of them are into the contact history with like someone in the family has been positive, someone in the friend circle has been positive. So most of the times these patients have no symptoms, or very primitive symptoms like mild headache or myalgia, but some or the other how they turned out to be COVID-19 positive. So in this early scenario, what are we supposed to do is like we perform routine investigations like CBC, random sugars, renal and liver profile, along with ECG. Although the protocol says that they should be in the isolation ward, but considering the current scenario, the home isolation is the best possible option we can give to these patients, with obviously close monitoring like pulse oximeter, SpO2, pulse, and blood pressure monitoring, and at least reporting it to us via telephone or via like other telecommunicating services. So we can consider this patient, or we can treat these patients with the help of that. Asymptomatic patients I'm talking about. So in group B, like when they have symptomatic or like other milder symptoms like fever, cough, sore throat, malaise, headache, anosmia, loss of taste, diarrhea. So or when they have earlier presenting symptoms, so we can, as we have seen, so we can consider various primitive tests in them like CBC, renal, liver profile, random sugars. Of course, we have to add X-ray in that, ECG, SpO2 monitoring. So if at all we have some CT screening facility, we can get the HRCT screening done and assess if there is any ground glass opacities around. So in these kind of patients, we have isolation ward, and again, as per the severity of the symptoms, we can admit them, or like we can go for home isolations for them. But as far as treatment is concerned, we can still wait and treat them with the help of antipyretics and nutrition and appropriate rehydration. So, and as we all know, the home isolation policy, patient need to follow up with us on daily basis, at least twice or thrice a day. So definitely is like resting tachycardia should not be there, and SpO2 should be like anything more than 94% on room air. So in group C, like we have symptomatic URTI with other comorbidities like patients having obesity or senior citizens having diabetes with ischemic heart disease, hypertension, chronic smokers like having COPD, bronchial asthma, immunocompromised state, and patients on immunocompressive drugs with having rheumatoid arthritis or CKD. So we have to anticipate whether this case is being like, will get deteriorated. We have to anticipate all these things. And again, along with the routine investigation, what we are supposed to do in these kind of cases, we have to admit them. And as per the routine protocols, we have to send them CBC, all the routine protocols. Along with that, we have to send 3 inflammatory markers like C-reactive proteins, D-dimer, and serum ferritin levels. And if the COVID positive sign is there, then we have to admit with the help of, we have to do the interleukin 6 markers so that we can anticipate whether the patient is being getting deteriorated and use the other novel drugs like tocilizumab or remdesivir in these kind of cases. So as far as treatment pattern is concerned, so after the admission, obviously we start these patients with hydroxychloroquine 400 milligram twice a day on day 1, and then 200 milligram BD for 4 days. As far as recent advances is being concerned, we have favipiravir, which is a broad spectrum antiviral, which can be given in the dose of 1800 milligram twice a day on day 1, followed by 800 milligram BD for say around 10 days or maximum up to 14 days. As far as antibiotics is concerned, what I have observed in my clinical practice is like as a fever, whenever there is a fever or if we see a ground glass opacity on the HRCT, so irrespective of the positivity of the case or negativity of the case, of course, this before we send the swab of the patient. So initially we start with hydroxychloroquine, baseline antibiotic like doxycycline or cefixime or cefpodoxime, and an anti-flu was like 75 mg BD twice a day. So with this rationale is like at least the symptomatic relief is always there for the patients, and whenever the swab comes positive, we can shift from anti-flu oseltamivir to favipiravir. And of course, with the cardiac patients or patients, we have to be very careful as far as HCQS is concerned in cardiac patients, post-plastic patients. So we must do ECG prior to starting this treatment. And once the patient completes its, if the patient has been hospitalized, we have to see the ECG daily. And if the patient has been under home isolation, we are supposed to see the ECG after 15 days. And when the disease is all about the disease is on the moderate stage, we need to consider the anticoagulation in all true means by using the low molecular weight heparin 0.4 milligram OD in the moderate form of cases. But in case of severity of the cases, we need to start low molecular weight heparin twice a day. Of course, after ruling out all the other coagulative disorders or any possibilities of hemorrhagic shock or septic shock. In moderate cases, like adolescent or adult present clinical features of dyspnea and hypoxia, like fever, cough, including an SpO2 anything less than 94% on room air, and having tachypnea like respiratory rate more than 24 minutes. So what are the red flag signs if developed in deteriorate, like neutrophil and lymphocyte ratio more than 3.5%, and like PF ratio less than 300, raised CRP, ferritin, D-dimer, LDH, and triglyceride, and SbO2 less than 88% on oxygen. So apart from routine investigations, like we have supposed to do his ECG, ABG, ESR, ferritin, D-dimer. If QTC is prolonged in ECG, then daily serum electrolyte, ionic calcium and magnesium. So on follow-up, like we are supposed to do is CRP, D-dimer, ferritin every 48 to 72 hours as per the availability of the lab. And of course, KFT and LFT has to be done. So in the treatment protocol, what we are supposed to give in two forms like HCQ 400 mg BD on day 1 and 200 mg BD for 5 days as prescribed, or injection remdesivir 200 mg OD at the starting and then 100 mg only after 4 days. After 4 days, when we repeat the CRP, ferritin and IL-6, if they are still on the higher side, then we can consider remdesivir for another 4 days or another 6 days and complete the 10 days of cycle. Or if the patient is asymptomatic, or if the patient is like maintaining the saturation above 90% on serum 4 to 6 liters of oxygen, we can consider favipiravir as per the doses, like 1800 mg BD on day 1 followed by 800 mg BD for 7 days, and we can continue it for 14 days. Along with, yes, we should not miss out on low molecular weight heparin subcut OD for per day. So we can consider a baseline antibiotic with that, like ceftriaxone IV OD for 5 to 10 days, and or to be given as the oral antibiotic policy. And if the patient satisfies the indication of tocilizumab, convalescent plasma can be given. And there are, of course, newer therapies that can be considered in the convalescent plasma studies are always anyways already underway. So nothing much has been said about the convalescent plasma theory. But as far as my clinical practice has been concerned, I can see a lot of tocilizumab and remdesivir patients used early in the stage in the patients are really patients are showing the good results and coming out of the ICU setups in a lesser amount of time, and the oxygen requirement is also going significantly low on day 3 and day 4. So if the D-dimer is raised in these kind of cases threefold, then low molecular heparin to be given in therapeutic doses, that is 40 milligrams subcut BD. So after the discussion of the treatment protocol in milder form, like right from hydroxychloroquine to tocilizumab, the role of steroids is also plays a very important role in managing these patients. So it's like we can use methylprednisolone in the dose of 1 to 2 milligram per kg body weight for the first 3 days, or injection dexamethasone like 5.2 to 0.4 milligram per kg body weight in some of the setups. But in the meanwhile, is like while we are using it, we have to be careful about a few things, like developing the secondary infections, and of course, if the patient is having some other comorbidity factors like diabetes, then we have to take care of the sugars with the use of basal and bolus regimen. In non-diabetic cases, what is my observation in treating these cases is like when we use the basal dose of when we use this dose of methylprednisolone in these patients, in non-diabetic patients, and when they are having high sugar levels, my observation is like rather than treating them with short-acting insulins, my observation is that is like if we use the basal insulin like Glargine or Degludec, so they have a very good results when we give the steroids for the longer period of time. So using the basal insulin instead of bolus have shown very good results in non-diabetic patients. So with no hypoglycemia, low chance of hypoglycemia, and not too much of dependency on the insulin, have also increased the kind of outcome of the patients. So when we talk about is like mild, moderate, and severe cases and manage all these cases, so it's been quite successful since past 10 to 15 days. The patients have started showing good results. It's like as far as we are concerned, Dinesh only shared one case today that the patient has been discharged even after the prolonged ventilation. So I think it is more than anything, it is early anticipation of the symptoms. As far as we are concerned, there is no textbook management of COVID-19 now. We all have experienced that. So early anticipation of the symptoms, early anticipation of like early interpretation of arterial blood gas analysis, monitoring of the sugars, using tocilizumab or remdesivir in the after anticipating the things, and by CRP, raised CRP markers, raised IL-6 and raised ferritin levels have played an important role in the good prognosis in the good prognosis of the patients. And I think yeah, so that should be in the future course also. The patients will do well if taking care of all the symptoms. So I think mild, moderate and severe symptoms wise we have discovered. So I think if any queries are there, Gunjar sir, maybe you can moderate it, or like if I think I can answer if any queries or anything in there.
Abhishek, we can keep the questions at the end of the two lectures. We will keep the questions at the end of the two lectures. Is that fine?
Yes, yes, sir.
Yes. So, may I request Chopra sir to start the presentation, the second presentation, STEMI in the COVID era. Sir, you can share the screen.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. I think we all are having problems of getting the bed, staff management, if patient is coming, how to segregate, how to isolate. All patients, we are all suspecting that it's going to be a COVID or not COVID, and that's creating a lot of issues because the patients coming with breathlessness or patient coming with a thrombosis in the form of myocardial infarct, stroke or DVT, they all are high likely that they will be COVID positive. So how do we go ahead? Initially, I like to share with you around 4 to 5 cases where what we did in last 3 months. In the last 3 months, I think almost more than 120 angioplasties and around 50 other therapeutic procedures like PMP, pacemakers I did. In that first case I share with you is the inferolateral wall MI thrombolized outside. Patient was shipped, angio was done, distal RCA 90% stenosis, left circumflex proximal 60-70% borderline lesion. No history suggestive of COVID, hence no fever, cough, nothing, everything was stable. He came for opinion and we got him admitted for angioplasty to RCA and FFR to circumflex and if required plasty. And the COVID sample was sent, and 24 hours, 36 hours, we got a sample which came COVID positive. Now what to do? Patient was stable, no ECG changes, echo was okay, around 45% EF, infraval MI, and as RCA was distal stenosis and the L circumflex was borderline, we decided that let him treat medically, and once he stabilizes after 1 month, we can plan an angioplasty for him. All patients coming with a STEMI, I think before we sent a sample, we get a report in 24 hours. So what are the COVID markers? As Abhishek said, I think the CBC lymphocyte count, ESR, CRP, D-dimer, BNP, tropi, CPK, LDH, and ferritin levels. At least this gives us an idea that the patient is going to be a high risk or low risk, and that helps us lymphocyte count, CRP, if it is a D-dimer or ferritin levels high, then that suggests that the patient might be possibly COVID positive, and then accordingly we plan the isolation and treatment. Second case was a basically 70-year-old female, progressive angina for last 1 month, and day of admission she had a severe chest pain since morning, more than 12 to 14 hours. She was a sister of one of the friend physician. Patient was having persistent pain, ST elevation, suggestive of antival MI, LVF 30%, and persistent pain came in night to the Magnum with more than 12 hours duration. Now extensive antival MI, I didn't have a choice. We all took a care, all PP gear and everything care taken and the PAMI done because of persistent pain and the elevations. COVID sample, we sent it next day. Luckily, report came negative. We managed till that time 48 hours isolation and managed as a COVID patient. And third day, we could discharge her with all evolved ECG and she was stable. Then case 3 was a patient coming with a inferoposterior RVMI within 1 hour, LVF, RVF 40%, RV infarct also, BP was okay. thrombolized with tenecteplase, patient became pain-free, ECG settled, we sent the COVID swab. But after 6 hours, patient has severe chest pain with reuptake in ST segments. We didn't have a choice. We had to take him for angio, which revealed RC 99% stenosis. We did a PTCA. All PPE kits were used, and we took care and isolated the patient. And luckily nowadays, 24 hours, we are getting a COVID report which came negative, and third day we could discharge the patient. Means again, inferior-posterior RVMI, thrombolized. It's like a pharmacoinvasive approach or rescue angioplasty because of the patient developing again STT changes. Case 4 was 38-year-old patient diagnosed as a COVID, bilateral ECG, HRCT changes, was admitted at other place. Second swab on 20th day came negative, patient was discharged, total 14 days, and was okay. And 20th day, patient developed chest pain, ECG showed an inferior posterior RVMI, it was a no RVMI, thrombolized, ECG settled, patient became pain-free. No other complication, X-ray chest clear, all markers were not so high. We sent the swab again, COVID swab came positive. As patient stabilized, ECG stable, we said we will continue medical treatment and manage him medically. Fifth case is a 70-year-old male, inferolateral wall MI. He had an inferior wall MI, which was a angio done 2 years back, RC 100% CTO lesion. Patient was given a medical treatment because left system was normal. And this time came with a ventilator. He had a cardiac arrest after a thrombolysis, and VT, VF, he was resuscitated. He was on ventilator, inotrope, shifted to Magnum. 4th day, we did a COVID, which came negative on 5th day. We did an angio. RCA was the same, CTO 100%. And the new lesion, left main was around 50-60%, and left circumflex OM, obtuse marginal branch, was 90%, which was a culprit vessel. In view of borderline left main, we did a FFR in that patient, and it came negative. LM, left main to LAD, we measured the pressure, and it was not, it was around 0.82. So basically, circumflex OM lesion, a lot of calcium, and very bad angle. And RCA was old lesion. We said that it's going to be a medical treatment. We continued medical treatment. We put him on a IABP. Over the 2 days, creatinine came down, patient's consciousness improved, BP, inotropes requirement was gone down. But 7th day, there was some partial block. Ventilator was not, tube was blocked. So we did a tracheostomy, but his inotropic requirement increased. After discussing with the relatives, increasing creatinine, acidosis, we put an ECMO on him. It was a veno-arterial mode. Metabolic parameters improved, he was improving, but on 3rd day of ECMO, patient developed resistant VT, VF, and we couldn't revive. 2 samples of COVID we did in this case, both were negative, but this is how we could manage. Now, as Abhishek said, I think Group A, Group B, and Group C, patient presenting with a STEMI is must. Group A is a COVID positive patient. Group B is a high suspicion. Initially, we used to say the international travel, but nowadays, clinically fever or any symptoms are there or not, or patient, and most of the patients are trying to deny the symptoms of fever, throat pain, body ache, muscle ache, and they just don't want to talk about that. That's the biggest problem in getting the patient differentiating also. But I think the blood markers, what we do, and the sample which we have to send, and accordingly we have to decide Group A, Group B, what is to be done. Group C is a very low, no possibility of COVID is very low. But similarly, one first case which I showed, no possibility of COVID, still he came COVID positive. So that overlap is going to be there in our practices. So for Group A and B, I think patient with ST elevation infarct, patient is coming first 3 to 6 hours. I think thrombolysis is the choice. If the patient is coming 12 hours, not thrombolized, persistent pain, and is falling into a high-risk group, extensive anti-wall MI, inferior-posterior RVMI, or patient is having hemodynamic instability, or patient having a repeated arrhythmias, in such patients, early intervention should be thought of. And other patients, I think we thrombolize. If they are stable, do a COVID swab negative, then whatever the guidelines are also talking about is now pharmacoinvasive approach. Thrombolize the patient, observe him. Initially, we used to say 6 to 24 hours, try to do angioplasty. Now we are talking about up to 72 hours. You can decide if the patient is stable or going for angio and angioplasty. The STEMI, again, what I told, clinically COVID screening is must. Then you do a blood markers for the COVID, and the swab should be sent. Again, Group A, Group B, Group C, high risk group, low risk group, and accordingly you decide it's a thrombolysis versus early angio or angioplasty. As I said, ki high risk group, antivolemi, hypertension, KLIP class 3, shock, resistant arrhythmias, delayed presentation, early angio, angioplasty. Otherwise, thrombolyze, wait, evaluate everything, and then plan a procedure. If patient is in a cardiac failure, again, we all know that basically BiPAP not to be used. Try to intubate patient, but again, intubation, you need to take a lot of care. So that's really a intensivist job, and they can take a decision the what way we should treat the patient. They are talking about the OTs, at least you maintain a negative pressure if possible. If you want to take up our surgery or anything, COVID-19 patients, then negative pressure maintenance is important in the OTs. Cath lab also they are talking about it, but again, it's very difficult, I think. Guidelines for controlling the infection, we all know that whenever the high risk patient we are taking or COVID, we don't know the status and we are thinking that the high risk category patient is there. Use appropriate PPE. That's important. You take a lot of care in getting exposed to the patient. And the personal management, whenever the patient is elderly, more than 60 years, having diabetes, hypertension, old angioplasty or bypass done, coming for a next infarct in that patient or COPD, I think all these patients, we need to take a lot of care because these are the patients who are going to have COVID positivity or high risk of having a COVID and the thrombosis. Basically, the biggest challenge what we are facing is the staffing models. Alternative staff models, we need to give them a rest. If they are exposed to a COVID patient, again, the 7 days rest, quarantine, all these problems which we are a lot of facing. I think we need to make a team. In ICCU and a cath lab, I think at least one nurse, one technician, one cardiologist works for 7 days, weekends, other team works, and that you alternate in between so that you will be able to take care of everything. PAMI, as I said, one patient, we are in 3-4 patients, we did a PAMI. Otherwise, we are trying to thrombolyze the patient, stabilize, and then take them for angioplasty. So nighttime, usually nothing is much is required. So teams can work in a better ways. So staff, how do we manage the staff is the biggest challenge we are facing. Shortage of nurses, shortage of doctors. How do we manage them? People not ready to work in high risk situations. But I think that's a big challenge for all of us. As I said that in COVID-19 cardiovascular disease, again, the high risk factors are important where you need to be more careful while treating the patient. As I say, it's a prior coronary vascular disease, patient of rheumatoid arthritis on immunosuppressants or steroids, metabolic problems, coagulopathy, patient immobile. All these patients developing acute coronary syndrome. Then second is myocarditis, arrhythmias, or patient going into a shock and the heart failure is a possibility. With COVID-19, if you look at the percentage of cardiovascular disease is 5 to 15%, diabetic 10 to 15%, and hypertension almost 30% reported in different trials. These are the patient possibility of having a acute cardiac injury is much more. What are the potential mechanisms? Most important for developing a thrombosis or infarct or a stroke, I think the severe inflammation in the COVID is the most important for developing a thrombosis. And along with that, sympathetic stimulation so that myocardial oxygen demand goes up, or patient may have a myocarditis like picture, but and the direct myocardial infection, but that possibility again is less. I have not seen a patient of myocarditis coming to our center. Basically, chances of patient having a heart failure or acute cardiac injury is around 15 to 25% in the severe COVID patients. Acute cardiac injury in this trial was around 12%. And as we talked about the high risk factors and the basically myocarditis, what we see in a myocarditis in histopathology, that is not seen in these patients of myocarditis. That myocarditis is slightly different, or it's a inflammatory response and causing the problem, we really don't know. And how do we diagnose myocarditis? Basically, again, the chest pain, breathlessness, ECG, STT changes, and most important is echo, I think. The generalized hypokinesia with reduced ejection fraction and the increased tropi and the CPKMB will be the diagnostic in this. And if that is there, then the patient developing a heart failure in the second or third week. Basically, patient, they say that the AC2 abundance is there and the binding site of SARS-CoV-2 is in cardiomyocytes is ACE2, and that is the possibility that develops the myocarditis in these patients, or can cause a rise in troponins even without myocarditis. Many patients, what we see, COVID positive, TROP-IR positive, and their echoes we do are normal. So it's a ACE2 mediated direct damage, hypoxia-induced myocardial injury, cardiac microvascular damage, that is a small and medium-sized thrombi which develops, and most important is the inflammatory response. That is IL-1 and the IL-6, and all this are causing a more inflammation and acute cardiac injury. And if you look at the course of COVID-19, it's a stage 2 and stage 3 is important, where the stage 2 against stage 2B, the latter part of stage 2 and the stage 3, there the chances of patient having a cardiac injury, patient presenting with myocarditis or heart failure is more common, or in that territory, the patients can come with a severe myocardial infarct or a pulmonary thromboembolism. We all were talking about before this, it's a primary PCI versus lysis pharmacokinetic treatment. And now this COVID era changed complete management style. We all say that the delay is there, then chances of thrombolysis failure is much more. So that you do an early PCI. But again, in this COVID era, getting a COVID test done, really evaluating the patient. Now it's a thrombolysis up to 6 hours, and try to do an angio, and if required, angioplasty in 24 to 72 hours. That's the changing pattern what we are going to see. Basically, if we see that ischemic time, what we are all talking about, less than 3 hours to maximum 6 hours, patient should be thrombolized or taken for angioplasties. But again, in this COVID era, how do we go? It's again, thrombolysis is important. Mortality, we all know, the earlier we intervene, that is one is the thrombolysis, reperfusion, and angioplasty in 24 hours, you have mortality is less, LVEF improvement is good. If door to balloon time, we say it's less than 90 minutes or up to 2 hours, the mortality is very less. But again, in this COVID era, should we go for a primary PCI? But I think more than 12 hours and high risk group should go for a primary PCI. Again, the availability of staff, really you are going to do it in a 90 minutes or not is important, so that thrombolysis and then pharmacoinvasive approach. And most important thing, what I saw in last 3 months, the lot of panic, patient not reporting to the hospitals in first 3 to 24 hours, coming on 3rd or 5th day with myocardial infarct, with heart failure, cardiogenic shock. Mortality was high. Last month, we had 6 to 7 patients in a week who came very late, and mortality was really high in spite of going for angioplasty, giving them an intra-aortic balloon pump support in some patients, but we lost a lot of patients in that week. We all know that fibrinolysis is important. Why fibrinolysis and pharmacokinetic approach? Basically, when we thrombolize the patient, re-ischemia and re-infarct is very common, because the 20 to 25% patients develop a reocclusion of the artery in first 3 days to 7 days after thrombolysis. And that's why we say in 24 to 72 hours, angio and angioplasty of culprit vessels should be planned. TIMI3 flow in infarct-related artery, we know with streptokinase it's around 60%, tenecteplase in first 3 hours it is given up to 80%, but still 20 to 30% patients artery doesn't open up. That's what lesion of reperfusion, reocclusion, intermittent patency, impaired macrovascular flow. But in this COVID era, thrombolysis in first 6 hours is very important and stabilize the patient, even though we have a problem. So we can plan a procedure in 24 to 72 hours where we can avoid the reocclusion and the reinfarct in that patients. Door to balloon time, it's very easy to say 90 to 120 minutes. But in India, I think the patients coming to hospitals is late. They don't reach to the hospital in first 6 to 8 hours. So that again, after reaching to the hospital, are we really able to achieve 120 minutes time or not? It's important. Mortality, we all know the first 90 to 120 minutes is less than 5%. As the time goes, the mortality increases. That's why the options of the lytic therapy, initially we used to say immediately do angioplasty, but no. Streptokinase, wait for 6 hours. Tenecteplase 3 hours, and after that you can take for angio and angioplasty. But again, nowadays initially we used to talk about 24 hours. It's 24 to 72 hours they are talking about, depending upon this COVID swab, other markers, clinically, how do you feel? It's a group A, group B, or group C. And that's what pharmacoinvasive strategy, it widens the window for PCI. If patient is stable, we can wait, breathe, and then take him for the procedure. So local rapid chip thrombolysis to majority and PCI routinely. And I think many of the patients still I thrombolize them with a streptokinase in spite of a tenecteplase. Basically, streptokinase cost is less, and if patient needs angioplasty, then we can save the cost and combine this together. It depends how much comfortable you are. In this, you can see that the thrombolytic therapy and then patient primary ASR PCI, if done in a timely manner and in a less than 6 hours, the comparable results are there. Pre-hospital thrombolysis morbidity mortality is 2%. It's not possible, but if patient comes in the 2 to 3 hours to hospital, I think we can have a better morbidity mortality. Pharmacokinetic approach, you can see 24 hours early angioplasty, better results were there. Median time to lytic was 2.7 hours. You can see in this death was same, but the reinfarct, recurrent ischemia, and myocardial worsening of heart failure was almost reduced by 30 to 40% in pharmacokinetic approach. So class 1A primary PCI, similarly the thrombolize the patient and angio and PCI is a class 1A indication in the European and the American guidelines. These are the pharmacokinetic approach, transfer AMI, fast MI, NORSTEMI, Gracia 2, all these they use the tenecteplase and first 3 to 24 hours angio and angioplasty of culprit vessel or plug. Current use primary PCI still is very low. Lot of people are getting thrombolized. I think the pharmacokinetic approach becomes the good for this. And in this COVID era, it has stamped this approach that thrombolize the patient and then take him for the angio and culprit vessel plasty. You can see this graph. When we see the myocardial damage and becoming the damage will not be reversible up to 4 to 6 hours, we say that if we thrombolize, reperfuse and do angioplasty, chances of myocardial damage will be less and the recovery will be much better. And that's why the first 6 hours becomes very important. And that's how from A to B will not make a difference, but B to C and C to D makes a lot of difference. And that's why the early pickup of the patients, early chest pain, ECG changes, thrombolize them, and if required, depending upon the patient's pain, ECG changes, patient having the hemodynamic instability, arrhythmias, early angio or angioplasty, or up to 3 days, you can plan an angio and do angioplasty depending upon your COVID report and other COVID markers and everything. That's why the STEMI, when it comes, we all used to talk primary PCI is the best, but practically it's always a thrombolysis and go for angioplasty, you have a breathing space. And in this COVID era, it has stamped it again that you thrombolize the patient. If there is not hemodynamically unstable, he's stable, I think planned angio and planned angioplasty will be a better choice. This is what I'd like to share with you all. I shared with you different cases, what we did in the that were medical treatment, early angioplasty, primary PCI, depending upon the scenario, how the patient is coming to a hospital and how do we evaluate them for the COVID and plan it. So accordingly, we decided and tried to do all cases of STEMI to be managed in a proper ways. Division into 3 groups and accordingly taking them for thrombolysis, then angio and angioplasty. And almost 120 angioplasties in last 3 months and around 50 therapeutic procedures. Accordingly, we have planned and did it very well. And because of that, we could offer them a good treatment. I think, but teamwork is very important. Isolation, segregation. Again, if you are thinking that the patient is falling into moderate to high risk, then keep him for isolated. Nowadays, at least we are getting a swab report in 24 hours. Now we have an antigen test also available. And if it becomes available in each and every hospital, it will become very easy. If it becomes negative, possibility or a positive is there, then the positivity report and you don't need to do a swab. And if it is negative there, clinical grounds, you can decide about you should go for a COVID swab or not. This was about the STEMI in COVID era and how did we manage the patients. This is from me. Thank you. Thank you for patient listening.
Thank you, sir. Any questions to the Dr. Abhishek sir and Chopra sir? With the antigen test coming, definitely our headache will be less. So because we will be having the reports earlier. Any questions?
Hello,
Ha, Vichara, Malu sir.
Dr. Man. Is there some post-exposure prophylaxis like protocol available?
I don't think there is a post-exposure prophylaxis protocol. It is just the prophylaxis for the COVID-19, which we have to take for the asymptomatic health care workers. And post-exposure, what we say that the relative which are asymptomatic of the COVID-19 confirmed cases, for them we can put on the hydroxychloroquine. That is what is only said.
What
You
about
know-
favipiravir? Means at least oral tablets are available where patient can take at home.
Right. All these prophylaxis guidelines and also the guidelines for the SARI, those are before the favipiravir and the remdesivir came. So we have to keep the watch on the guidelines with these medicines coming, whether they change the guidelines. Dr. Abhishek sir, you want to add something?
As of now, there are no proven guidelines as far as favipiravir is concerned. But I wanted to ask my colleague, like if anybody can throw the light on using favipiravir like before COVID reports or like as a prophylaxis or something. So is it like just like we are using oseltamivir as far as the rest of the cases are concerned? We used to treat a year back or something when somebody presents with respiratory disorder. So oseltamivir used to be the second choice after a macrolide antibiotics or quinolone group of antibiotics. So accordingly, I would like Dinesh, if he's around, or any one of my colleagues to throw the light on it, like using favipiravir as a prophylaxis.
As a prophylaxis or? Yes, please go ahead.
As a prophylaxis. As
Yeah,
of now, we are starting favipiravir after the COVID-19 test positive in the milder form of the symptoms, and to some extent in the moderate form of the symptoms, along with remdesivir and tocilizumab to some extent.
but
Yeah.
just a question.
It,
I think the pharmacy does not issue favipiravir till you don't have the
confirm report.
corona report, right? As far as I know.
And secondly,
Actually, there are two things. One is the preventive for the asymptomatic people, and other is the management of the SARI patient when you have the COVID-19 negative report.
Okay.
Yes, when COVID-19 PCR report is coming negative,
Huh.
whether we can give the favipiravir or not. That is the question. I think
Yeah.
the
So
sir want
without
to
the
discuss.
can the pharmacy issue?
Yes, it can issue on the physician's prescription. Guidelines are not very clear about using the favipiravir or remdesivir in a patient with SARI. The guidelines of empirical using the hydroxychloroquine and the Tamiflu guidelines are there initially for empirical use of the hydroxychloroquine and the Tamiflu for the SARI patient. After the coming to the favipiravir and the remdesivir, there are no clear guidelines whether we can use them in the SARI patient or not. 2 days before, there was a lecture of Dr. Nagwekar from the Global Hospital, Mumbai, and he presented a case of the healthcare professional coming COVID-19 negative repeatedly, but clinically it was suspected that it is the COVID-19, and he said that he is using the remdesivir and even the tocilizumab in a patient which is clinically suspected of the COVID-19. So I think it is going to be the individual decision. There are no clear-cut guidelines whether we should go ahead with the antivirals, new antivirals, especially in patients who come COVID-19 negative. Anyone want to
Also, there
add?
is not much of the data.
Yes, there is no much of the data and the guidelines whether the
These both drugs are on compassionate ground only available in India. They are not means in the guidelines like one can use it like Tamiflu. In fact, favipiravir is an anti-flu drug, which has been just approved in some countries on trial basis only.
any other question?
Hello. Hello.
Ha, Vichar.
My question is to Chopra sir. whether we can, what will be the role of steroids in patients who have cardiomyopathy due to COVID?
Basically, for the COVID guideline, what you are doing moderate to severe form using the steroids. If the patient is in heart failure, as such, for a myocarditis with heart failure, really role of steroids is there or not is a question mark. But the patient with having a SARS and the second and third stage developing a heart failure, I think the steroids should be given. But there is a controversial opinion about that. I'd like to know that when you are treating a SARS patient for a second or the third week patients and coming with a heart failure, what you people have done? Anybody has a experience about this second or the third week patient coming with SARS and again the echo is also showing a myocarditis and heart failure is there? Because the number of patients treated are very less, and really the steroids in some patients it was used, some patients it was not used, but basically it was for a lung injury. And this myocarditis, again the role of Clexane and the aspirin will be important in this.
Yes, we don't have much of the data about cardiomyopathy in the COVID, how to manage them, except the going ahead with the anticoagulants and except going ahead with the anticoagulants and continuing the cardiomyopathy management what we used to do in non-COVID era. Praveen sir is there? You want to add anything? Cardiomyopathy and COVID? Gare sir?
Hello, hi. तर दोन anticoagulation आणि steroids. So basically we were treating the patients in February, March, April. In that period, the dexamethasone trial which came I think 2-3 weeks back, it was not there. So the evidence for steroids was not much. We have not used in any of our patients steroids. So I had very limited experience. First thing, my ICU had 15 patients with severe ARDS. So out of 15, only one patient we gave methylprednisolone, the 1 milligram per kg. But other 14 patients, we never gave steroids. And as Chopra sir said, none of my patients had cardiomyopathy. So most of them had some moderate pulmonary hypertension, but nobody had typical viral myocarditis or cardiomyopathy. It was largely the pulmonary hypertension because of hypoxia. Out of these 15 patients, 13 patients did very well. One patient died because of sepsis and multi-organ failure. The other one is still in our ICU. He is complicated by renal failure, then ICU acquired weakness. So he's still there, and he also had some gangrenous cholecystitis. So he is still with us. But yes, largely, so steroids, I really don't think has very great role. There are various studies which say it is good. Then again, after a few days, people say, no, it's not good. What I see in India, steroids, it's like from day one, people are using steroids. So I feel थोडंसं जरा जुडिशियस यूज करायला पाहिजे स्टेरॉइडचा. माझे 3 नातेवाईक ऍक्च्युली पुण्यामध्ये वेर admitted in a big corporate hospital. So all of them received steroids from day one. So I don't know how you are doing it in Nasik, but I think steroid judicious use करायला पाहिजे. As Chopra sir said, maybe first week we shouldn't be using it because it is the viral phase. Second week मध्ये जर आपल्याला persistent hypoxia आणि ते हायपर इन्फ्लेमेटरी त्याच्यामध्ये जर वापरलं तर माझ्या मते ठीक आहे. तर ते स्टेरॉइड बद्दल. त्याच्यानंतर अँटीकोॲग्युलेशन ऑल्सो. सो there is lot of talk about anticoagulation. We never gave therapeutic anticoagulation of any of our patients. It was all routine DVT prophylaxis dose which we did. None of our patients landed into pulmonary embolism or DVT. So all this data about PE and DVTs is from US or European countries. I think there they already have high prevalence of this hypercoagulable things and more DVTs and Ps. आपल्याकडे माझ्या मते लोकल पॉप्युलेशन मध्ये आय डोंट नो, बट हिअर वी डोंट सी दॅट मच Ps and DVT. So here we still follow with our usual DVT prophylaxis dose. We don't talk about this different D dimer levels, AAA मग इतकं वापरा असं. तर ह्या दोन गोष्टी मला सांगायच्या होत्या. बाकी आय थिंक या.
Okay. Is Dr. Sendane online? तुम्हाला काय विचारायचं आहे अजून?
I need to ask one question to Pimpalkar sir. In how many patients do you use anticoagulants at the time of discharge?
अभिषेक सर.
Yeah. How many patients we use anticoagulants, right?
At the time of discharge. Yeah.
Yeah. We use anticoagulants is like
म्यूट करा. तर फार डिस्टर्बन्स येतोय. म्यूट करा सगळ्यांनी. Yes, Abhishek, go ahead.
So in the milder forms, it's like in almost all the COVID-19 positive patients, we are using anticoagulants. It's like it's for the milder symptoms, we are using like antiplatelets like aspirin on a little bit on the higher doses to be on the safer side. And for anything like from mild grade B to severe to moderate forms, we are using low molecular heparins, say like 0.4 ml subcutaneously. And if in the severe forms, in the shock, we are using 0.4 ml subcutaneously twice a day. So yes, as per the protocols, we are using the anticoagulants in all the patients. And plus, like in elderly cases, even post-discharge, we are using anticoagulants for say around a month's time or something. Obviously, we need to rule out other hemorrhagic complications or other complications with that.
Do you decide the dose of low molecular weight heparin depending upon the D-dimer levels, whether to use the therapeutic or prophylactic dose of the low molecular weight heparin? Abhishek sir.
Sorry sir?
D-dimer level ठरवतात का whether you have to use the therapeutic or prophylactic dose?
Sir, D-dimer नुसार आपण ठरवतो की इकोस्प्रिन वर म्हणजे ठेवू शकतो की D-dimer is raised 2-3 fold, then low molecular heparin आपण वापरतो.
Gunja sir, you have a choice of muting all the people. Those who are not talking, please mute them. Gunja sir, you can mute all other people who are not talking. There is a lot of disturbance.
Guidelines say clear cut that if the D-dimer is raised 2 or 3 fold, we can go straight away for the therapeutic dose.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we have to just give the prophylactic dose. And adding to one more point to the discussion regarding the use of anticoagulants, there are certain reports coming again from the US side that even after recovery, few patients are seen to have DVT and even strokes post-recovery phase. So they are trying not only ecosprin, but in those cases where they are having definite evidence of a raised D-dimer, they are using molecule like dabigatran for a longer period of time, for more than 6 weeks they are recommending.
Yeah.
But though no official statement have come, but these are reports and these are the therapeutic scenarios currently. Because this is going to deliver, the data is going to come quite late. We have to keep on experimenting in such gray areas, case to case basis.
True.
It's basically raised D-dimer, and on echo, if you have a pulmonary hypertension, so possibility of pulmonary thromboembolism or the patient having thrombosis is there. There you use a twice a day dose, and as you said about the DABI and NOACs, they are saying that up to 6 weeks you should give them a oral anticoagulant.
Right, sir. Any other question?
Many of the patients had a cough in last month.
Oh, sir. Swapnil, sir. Go ahead.
To do the CT, HRCT says of bilateral pneumonia with fibrosis.
Swapnil.
Swapnil, sir.
Yes, Swapnil.
Bilateral interstitial pneumonia.
I think he has to mute his speaker first.
Am I audible, sir?
एवढा आवाज येत नाहीये स्वप्नील. You need to be a little louder.
Patient come in the OPD with a history of acute febrile illness in last 1 month. They treated at home by themselves, and now only come for complaint of cough. If we ask for CT, bilateral pneumonia with some fibrosis and COVID IgG is positive.
That
So
means
how
they are recovered. Spontaneous recovery.
But by whether really there is role of flavipiravir in these such cases?
What about RT-PCR? Was that negative?
Was not done.
Then if IgG is positive, we have to get the RT-PCR done. Or if then only we can say whether it is confirmatory or not. We have to get it confirmed, though the disease is 1 month, but again, whether patient is coming with the pneumonia-like features and CT showing the viral pneumonia, I think the RT-PCR should be done. Or the antigen.
Can I add?
Yes, please, Dinesh.
Yeah, we have similar patient in almost 4 or 5 patients. We had similar type of presentation. They had fever since last 1 month, and they were at home, and they did not consulted anybody. And now this time probably consulted with general practitioners, and they were at home only, managed at home. And now when they came in, they had, as Swapnil described, similar types of shadows, like resolving fibrotic shadows. But when we did the RT-PCR, as we were not having the facility of IgG, we did the RT-PCR, which came out to be positive. And maybe in those cases wherein there is still a viremia, we should consider treating them with antiviral.
Okay.
So can we have a take-home message that whoever is symptomatic and with a history of fever, irrespective of, because now a lot of patients are doing antibody tests, irrespective of their antibody status, should we go for a RT-PCR if it is not done earlier, or even if it is done earlier, we should again repeat RT-PCR?
That is what is the confirmatory test. So we have to go ahead with it. Or otherwise, at least we have to do the antigen test if we want the rapid diagnosis once it is available. Is Dr. Sendane online or Dr. Palod? I think no one is from the authorities. So is there any other question?
Sir, I want to ask Gare sir regarding their take on favipiravir.
Gare sir, are you online?
Vinod.
Yes, sir. What is your take on favipiravir?
It is not yet approved in Singapore. So
Okay.
here nobody gets favipiravir for COVID.
Okay.
Though you are comparatively closer to Japan.
Ah.
I have a question for Pramod again. Dear Pramod, please throw some light about permissions of antigen testing, availability of antigen testing for commercial use for private practitioners.
I think the laboratory has to apply to the corporation and get the permission. Whoever applies it will get the permission, and they have to purchase the kit from the agencies. There is no much hurdle, I think, in doing the antigen test. It has been approved by the ICMR.
NABL is not required.
There is a clause that the laboratory has to be NABH approved, but I think we have to get it with the NMCs whether they approve it without NABH accreditation.
Okay.
Either the hospitals have to be NABH or the lab has to be NABL. I think there is
Whoever is doing the test, whether it is the separate lab or the hospitals are purchasing the kits.
I think we should promote this testing, antigen testing, because it comes within say 1 hour. That would be a game changer.
Actually, NMC people are waiting for the people to apply for the approval of the antigen testing. They are waiting for it, and I think they will get the approval. Yesterday, I talked with the Polo. He said that we are waiting for the application to come.
Okay, that's news for me actually. Because I remember Nilesh coming to, I was in a meeting at corporation and Nilesh Pawar came with the permission for this CLI antibody testing machine he got for healthcare workers. And there the authorities were little in dilemma whether to permit or not. So it was that time it was for zero surveillance. Now ICMR is saying that, last 2 days ICMR is saying that it is open for commercial purposes also. All those who are in the containment zones, close contacts, and even healthcare workers as in the initial guidelines. So I think antibody testing has been given permission. Antigen, we are waiting someone to come up. I don't know who are the sources of antigen testing. Is it the same kind of company who does the RT-PCR swab collection or it's different?
Antigen साठी sir kits त्यांना purchase करायला लागणार ना. There is quite good number of list of the antigen test kit providers.
I think my labs are
ICMR
doing antigen providing the kits. My labs
for the antibodies or antigen.
MyLab antigen देते.
Antigen देते.
And as usual shortage होतं त्यावेळेस त्यांनी 850 वगैरे कोट केलं होतं. आता they are government says 450 पण त्यात परत व्हायरल ट्रान्सपोर्टेशन मीडिया हे सगळे ऍड झाल्यानंतर ते परत खर्च वाढणारच आहे. पण ऍटलीस्ट एक सुविधा आहे की इट विल बी फास्टर.
Definitely antigen test coming will be definitely the changer for all of us, game changer for all of us, because it will give us the rapid diagnosis.
But antigen test you will need RT-PCR, no?
No sir, antigen test is different sir.
Different mechanism.
Antigen test is different and RT-PCR is different. RT-PCR takes long time because the cycle takes I think 4 to 6 hours for one cycle to complete. An antigen test it is like a kit where we put the
15-20 minutes.
Yeah, 15-20 minutes. So that will be good things. I think thank you everyone for participating. Thank you Abhishek for elaborating on the stages and the treatment, and Chopra sir for the STEMI in the COVID era. Next week we will have the slide change. It will be on the Wednesday instead of the Friday. Dr. Trivedi sir has agreed to talk on the approach to COVID-19 patient going into the storm and the role of IL-6 inhibitor. So that we will have on the Wednesday. Thank you everyone once again.
Thank you Pramod, thank you Manoj and Abhishek. And thank you for Praveen for his gesture to join from Singapore. Safety first guys. Let's take adequate precautions. There are 6 physicians at the moment at home. So you all know that we are going to fight this out. Precautions are very important, and irrespective of precautions, there are physicians and surgeons who are getting infected. So just best of luck, keep fighting, keep going. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.